Franklin Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, and Joseph Stalin met and planned for a full-scale invasion of German-occupied Europe just 3 days after Pearl Harbor. But its immediacy was quickly diminished by a lack of preparation and by counterplans which took prevalence in Churchill's eyes. One of these was Operation Torch, a plan to invade northwest Africa where British troops were defending the Suez Canal. This was a part of Churchill's soft underbelly strategy, in which the Allies would focus the areas supporting Germany rather than the Nazis themselves. Winston Churchill wanted to avoid a head-on invasion at all costs, and for some time Roosevelt and Stalin complied. But eventually, pressure from the US and the Soviets, as well as the threat of Stalin moving for a peace agreement with Hitler, forced Churchill to finally comply with the launch of a full-scale invasion, aka Operation Overlord. Before the Allies could put Operation Overlord into full throttle, they had to ensure that their carefully conceived plan was not discovered before it had even begun. Enter Operation Bodyguard, dedicated entirely to throwing the Germans off Operation Overlord's scent. For months in advance, the Allies launched entire dummy armadas, paper trucks, and 2-pound tanks in order to convince German troops that they were preparing for a large-scale invasion. And though they were, these fake fleets were launched hundreds of miles away from Normandy, convincing Hitler to reinforce areas they weren't even going to attack, leaving the real target more exposed. On top of the fake army, the Allies used every opportunity to feed the German intelligence fake information. Phony locations and invasion dates were broadcast over radio chatter, German spies were captured and used as double agents, and ordinary men became majors and generals. One of these men was M.E. Clifton James, an Australian actor hired to impersonate General Bernard Montgomery. James's role was simple. He had to walk around in the public eye of Algiers, nearly 1,600 miles away from Normandy. The presence of such a high-ranking general immediately drew attention from German intelligence, convincing them that something was going on in northwest Africa. Another man used to confuse and mislead German intelligence was Glenveer Michael. He was a homeless man whose corpse was used to forge a fake officer carrying top-secret information. Michael's character, dubbed Major Martin, washed ashore a beach in Spain, his body littered with falsified documents planted on him to be discovered by the enemy. This deception by the Allies was made a year before the invasion, but Operation Bodyguard did not end the day Normandy was invaded. In fact, 3 days after the troops' feet hit the sand, Juan Pujol Garcia convinced Hitler the invasion was a farce, meant to lure his troops away from the true assault planned for Pas de Calais. Hitler trusted his words so much that he waited a full 7 weeks before sending reinforcements to his troops, allowing the Allies to gain the momentum they needed to end the war.
On October 14, 1890, an incredibly influential leader was born. At the time, nobody would have thought that Dwight D. Eisenhower would end up being such an important leader in America. As Eisenhower grew up, he enlisted himself in the armed forces and earned a large amount of fame and awards in World War I. After being promoted to captain and earning a Distinguished Service Medal, it was clear that Eisenhower would be an important figure of the U.S. Armed Forces. With this in mind, it isn't surprising that he was asked to return to action during the Second World War. In May of 1941, he was made Chief of Staff of the 3rd U.S. Army. Along with this, in June of 1942, he was appointed to be the U.S. commander of the troops in Europe. This was only the beginning of Eisenhower's fame, however, as his big accomplishments came around December 24, 1943, when he was offered the position of the Supreme Commander, Allied Expeditionary Force. Many soldiers, sailors, Allied members, and regular citizens looked up to him and trusted him. This became extremely prevalent after his speech he made on June 5, 1944.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you.
The speech was to wish good luck to the soldiers about to go into war, and it assured his confidence in them. This helped the members going into war to be hopeful and spirited in themselves and their cause.
We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessing of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking.
On the morning of June 6, 1944, thick clouds and rough seas defined the English Channel and the coast of Normandy. Lieutenant Colonel James E. Rudder, commanding the 2nd Ranger Battalion, received the mission to land at 6:30 a.m., scale the 100-foot cliffs, and disable the German positions at Pointe du Hoc on the coast of Normandy.
We were all kind of special, and we had something burning within us. We were ready for action. We were gung-ho fellows. We loved excitement and adventure.
The Rangers had been preparing for this mission. They had trained in order to have the strength and skill required to not only fight, but to do so while ascending the cliffs. On June 6th, at 5:50 a.m., naval bombardment of Pointe du Hoc began, including guns of the battleship USS Texas. 2 landing craft were initially lost, but the Rangers started up the cliffs. They pressed upward, supported by the destroyer USS Satterlee. Despite fierce resistance, Rangers found and destroyed the guns, pushing onward to cut a path on the highway south of Pointe du Hoc. After fighting for 2 days, only about 90 Rangers stood and relieved by Lieutenant Colonel Max F. Schneider's 5th Ranger Battalion, the 29th Division from Omaha Beach. At a high cost of life, they successfully defended against determined German counterattacks, protecting Allied troops from German bombardment on the beaches and taking a powerful position on the coast that was a main factor in the success of the D-Day attack.
Saint-Mère-Église is a city and church located in France, but was previously occupied by German soldiers in the spring of 1944. Just a few months later, on June 6th, the Allies invaded in efforts of recapturing the area. At about 11 p.m., a prominent house in Town Square caught fire. Townspeople then formed a line from a pump to the house and passed buckets of water in efforts to extinguish the fire. While the people were distracted, paratroopers began landing and open firing while ordering people to return to their homes. Fighting continued on for about a day until the Allies occupied the town on June 7th, making Saint-Mère-Église the first town to be liberated. Saint-Mère-Église is well known for the paratrooper John Steele. John Steele was an American paratrooper that landed on the pinnacle of the church tower. He was shot in the foot and survived, but was trapped in his parachute for the entire duration of the fighting, with no choice but to just watch what was happening below him. Now there's a mannequin hanging from the roof with a parachute around it to resemble John Steele. The church has also remembered the paratroopers by designing their windows to depict images of them. Although all these details are very important for Saint-Mère-Église and D-Day, there is one detail that trumps everything else. Saint-Mère-Église is home to the Mr. Ellery's favorite pastries, and at the end of the day, that is all that truly matters.
Cherbourg is a port city on the coast of France that during World War II was in German occupation. Allied forces knew it was vital for them to have port access for an easy way to build their forces and supply resources faster than the Germans could. Cherbourg was chosen as their intended target since it was the only port city near Normandy. The Battle of Cherbourg took place between June 6, 1944 to June 30th, 1944. U.S. troops of the 4th, 9th, and 79th Division raided the German defenses. By June 20th, all 3 divisions reached Hitler's last line of defense. However, this wasn't enough. These attacks were followed by a bombing raid on June 22nd. 1,100 tons of explosives were dropped on German troops. It wasn't until June 27, 1944, that Cherbourg was free from German control. On June 27, 1944, the Allied forces recaptured the city and returned it back to France. Once all battles stopped, specialists worked long hours to try and clear the port. Several months after, Cherbourg was finally able to resume all normal operations.
Avranches is a city in France that was the target of violent bombings a day after D-Day. 7 weeks after D-Day, on Monday, July 24, 1944, American forces enact Operation Cobra led by General Omar Bradley, a high-risk bombing mission with the objective of seizing Avranches. The Americans knew if they secured Avranches, they would have control over Brittany, a region in the western area of France. Securing Brittany would let Americans have access to multiple ports and gain an advantage over the Axis powers. The air phase of Operation Cobra began at 10 a.m. on the morning of the 25th. Altogether, the air effort dropped over 4,100 tons of bombs on German positions, killing over 1,000 German soldiers, wiping out 3 battalion command posts, and destroying or severely damaging most of its armor and armored personnel carriers. This aggressive bombing style served heavy casualties to the opponents, but also had some issues with friendly fire on the Allied side, which is accidental injury or death stemming from one's own forces. The operation ended up being a success because of the vulnerability of the German soldiers at the time. In an initiative to take back Avranches, Hitler planned Operation Ludick, which was immediately shut down without much of a fight by Allied offensives.
There were many different kinds of weapons used on D-Day at the beaches of Normandy. The types of weapons vary based on who produced them. Americans were the top producers of weapons during World War II. Overall, we produced 11 million rifles and carbines, 2.8 million pistols and revolvers, 2.3 million submachine guns, 1.5 million crew-served machine guns, 188,000 automatic rifles, nearly 19 million small arms, and 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition. They sometimes even used fake weapons and artillery as a scare tactic. This made them seem more powerful than they actually were. This fake artillery included inflatable tanks, rubber airplanes, and even dummy soldiers. They were put at the front lines of battle most of the time in an attempt to intimidate Hitler and his troops. The British provided great artillery as well. With many different types of rifles, carbines, machine guns, submachine guns, and sidearms, they were obviously incredibly helpful when it came to artillery. Despite the Allies' efforts, Germany was by no means inferior to its competitors. With the new Seminole bolt action design included by Peter Paul Mauser in the 1871 rifle became the global standard for rifles and held the title for decades. Not only did Germany have what was the best rifle at the time, but they also had a wide variety of pistols, one of these being the Walter P38, the first double-action auto pistol ever accepted for military use. The close competition when it came to weapons and artillery is one of the things that made the war so difficult for both sides.